Council meeting of Wednesday, November 21st, 2018 at 9 a.m. Mrs. Arrington, Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski is absent right now, but he'll be calling in by phone in a little bit. Mr. Mursky, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon. Please rise for a moment of silent meditation and pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of minutes from the meeting of November 7th, 2018, and bills for payment on November 15th and 22nd, 2018. Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Mursky, Ms. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mrs. Arrington. Mayor, you can present your budget now, please.
Thank you. President Arrington, City Council, I'm happy to be here to present the 2019 budget to you. You have, I believe, a copy of my speech in front of you, as well as a copy of the budget that I'll refer to. So I hope you're all committed to the 6-word mission that our administration has, which is to build opportunity, restore hope, and transform Erie. We want Erie to be a community of choice. Our vision is that we create and celebrate 5 things that really make Erie unique. Those 5 things are, number 1, our rich cultural diversity. Number 2, our welcoming, vibrant neighborhoods. 3, our world-class downtown and bayfront. 4th, our excellent education for everyone. And 5th, our abundance of good family-sustaining jobs. Our finances play an important role in realizing this vision. If the city is financially strong, we will achieve this transformational vision much more quickly and rapidly. I'm committed to continuing to being open, honest, transparent, and accessible during the city budget discussions with you. The financial numbers you're seeing today are exactly that. I was pleased that we presented you with the preliminary budget 2 weeks ago. I believe this is the first time that this has ever been done. You'll recall that we faced an $11 million deficit in looking at 2019. And I will tell you, you made a couple suggestions in caucus for how we could even be more transparent, and we will do those things next year. I'm committed to that. The $11 million deficit was actually caused by 4 things. First, $4.3 million is due to an increase in our debt payment. $4 million is due to the fact that there's less money in sewer and refuse reserves to transfer. $2 million is due to salary and benefit increases, and about $700,000 is because CDBG has reduced our reimbursement for salaries. Based on the great input we got from the preliminary budget, we have made a couple of changes to what we presented 2 weeks ago to you, but our primary 2 approaches still remain the same, and they are to increase revenue by $6.4 million by raising the city income tax from 1.18 to 1.75, and then a $4.2 million reduction in expenses in our debt payments by refinancing the city debt. The little over 0.5%, 0.57% increase in city income tax will only apply to individuals who work and live in the city. Based on the average income of city workers, which is $26,922, just under $27,000, that represents about a $153 annual increase, or about $5.88 per biweekly pay. For people who itemize their federal tax returns, city taxes paid are a deductible item. It would be fairer much fairer if the income tax increase would apply to everyone who works in the city, regardless of where they live. After all, everyone who works in the city does use city services, such as our streets or emergency services when they're needed. However, by state law, our pension funds are currently not weak enough to allow us to charge the income tax increase to non-city residents. When you compare our proposed 2019 income tax rates with the 2018 income tax rates of the 14 other third-class cities in Pennsylvania, Erie will still be 11th out of the 15 third-class cities. And if some of the other third-class cities also raise theirs, we may be actually lower than that. Finally, on the tax increase, as our vision becomes reality and we have more businesses operating in Erie and more people living in Erie, my goal over time is to reduce the city income tax rate. I honestly would prefer not to implement the second primary strategy of refinancing the debt to reduce the 2019 payment by $4.2 million. Long-term, over years, this will cost the city more money, but I see no other viable way to balance the 2019 budget. The three other possible revenue increases we presented 2 weeks ago were increasing the amusement tax from 3% to 5%, yielding about $160,000 in additional revenue, increasing the curb cut degradation fee by 11% to give us about $100,000 in additional revenue, and implementing a $100 business licensing fee yielding $200,000 in additional revenue. We decided against the $100 business licensing fee, as has already been announced. We have lots of innovators and entrepreneurs starting new businesses right now in Erie. Those opposed to this, including Chris Groner, our Director of Economic and Community Development, argued very strongly that this fee would place a huge burden and prevent many innovators and entrepreneurs from creating our business of the future here in Erie. We also cut the curb cut degradation fee in half to 5.5%, so it will yield $50,000 instead of $100,000. 11% was a very large increase. Outside of a couple of large utilities, about 75 to 80% of fees actually paid by this particular fee by small contractors like carpenters and plumbers who are serving Erie residents. Finally, we will also be leaving the amusement tax at 3% is our recommendation for 2019. We received, as I think many of you did as well, some very strong arguments against the 2% increase from the Convention Center Authority, from actual owners of the teams that compete here in Erie, and contractors who bring Broadway plays and musicals to Erie. But what finally really convinced us is that the fact that the Convention Center Authority will be voluntarily paying building permit fees to the city of Erie in the amount of $191,000 for the work they will be doing on the ballpark, the Erie Insurance Arena, and the Warner Stage. They actually don't have to do that, but they are going to do that, and that more than offsets the increase in the amusement tax. Two other fee increases that we presented 2 weeks ago are still part of the 2019 budget. They are increases in the quarterly sewer fee from $70 to $78.15, and the quarterly refuse fee from $56 to $60. That's quarterly. When we compare these fees with the 2018 fees currently charged by Girard, Fairview, Harbor Creek, Wesleyville, Mill Creek, Lawrence Park, and Northeast, the city's fee will still be the 6th lowest out of the 8 local municipalities. Also, if some of these other municipalities raise their fees, we might actually fall lower than that on the scale. These increases will allow us to transfer $1.1 million each from the sewer and refuse to compensate the city for our risks and expenses in running the plant and the operations of sewer and refuse. When I became aware of our budget challenges back in July, we took another major step to address the city budget challenges for years to come. The city delivers services to city residents. Salary and benefits of city employees account for 90.6% of the 2019 budget. My direction in July to all city managers was this: whenever an employee is transferred or leaves a position, do not immediately replace them. Instead, evaluate the position and ask 2 questions. First, does the position really need to be replaced? And second, if it does, can we replace it with a part-timer rather than a full-time position? I'm proud to tell you that as a result of that policy, we have not replaced 6 positions for an average annual savings in salary and benefits of just under $600,000, $568,831. This policy remains in place going forward, and I can tell you that we already are aware of one position that will become open or vacant in 2019 that we are not replacing, and we'll be continuing down that path. Finally, I'd like to draw your attention to a major change in how we are presenting this year's budget. We have implemented a budget procedure that is highly recommended by financial professionals. I'd ask you at this point, in your preliminary budget book, there's a section called 5-year forecast at the very end. If you could turn to that, I'd appreciate it. I want to just show you a couple things in there. On the first page, you'll see the 5-year budget forecast. This process will keep us grounded and helps to prevent the kind of $11 million crisis we found ourselves in this year. If you look at the very bottom line on the page, you will see deficit forecasts for the next 5 years, from 2020 to 2014. For instance, you can see the deficit of $4,638,464 is forecast for 2020. It goes up a little under $2 million to $6,498,385 in 2011. The biggest deficit increase is just over $6 million in 2014. That goes up just a little over $6 million from 23 to 24. I'm sorry, I should have said 2024 there. These projected deficits assume that we do nothing to increase income or control expenses over 5 years. All they do is just move everything forward. If we are successful in growing Erie's population and creating an abundance of family-sustaining jobs, the actual future results will be much different. This glimpse into the future helps us to make much better financial decisions in the 2019 budget. But remember, the further you get out into the future, probably the less accurate these projections will become. The very next page, if you look at that for a minute, shows a 5-year projection on the sewers budget. The important line here is the second line from the bottom. This shows the worst-case estimate of what sewer fees will be over the next 5 years. As we grow Erie's jobs and population and reduce expense growth, I expect these fees to decrease. But again, based on nothing changing, that's what our sewer fees would be for the next 5 years. As was mentioned in caucus, we're not comfortable pushing things off and waiting 4 or 5 years to increase fees, which means we actually have to increase them more than we would have to if we just did it regularly. The next page shows a 5-year projection on the refuse budget. And again, if you look at the second line from the bottom, you can see a worst-case estimate of refuse fees for the next 5 years and what will happen to them. Again, the biggest increases in both of these you'll see is in 2024. And again, I just remind you, there's a lot that can happen in between there to change that. Finally, the very last page shows you our expected expenditures for debt service. The refinance we are doing for 2019 shows the first major payment increase of just over $1 million occurring in 2021. So we know what's going to happen in the future. We'll know that for sure. The second major increase of about $3.5 million takes place in 2023, from 2023 to 2024. Saying that right? I'm sorry, 22 to 23, thank you. Yeah. Our long-term financial planning for the next 2 to 4 years must allow us to handle these payment increases. So that's something we need to keep in mind through all our budget planning going forward. I don't want to have to refinance the debt again, basically. In conclusion, I'd just like to leave you with 3 thoughts. First, I am proud that there is no property tax increase in the 2019 budget. Many Erie residents own their home and pay property taxes. Many of them are retired and on fixed incomes. So I'm very happy that we're not doing that. Second, while the 2019 budget is short-term, we are working with the state's early intervention program to evaluate every aspect of city operations for efficiency and cost savings. We have met with Ed Fosnot from the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development. Ed expects the state will pay up to 90% of our consultant fees. We are expecting consultant proposals by next week, November 29th. We'll be interviewing candidates in early December and plan to have our early intervention plan consultant begin work on a long-term financial strategy for the city in early 2019. Finally, third and last, our recommendation for the 2019 budget will raise income taxes and refinance the debt. Those are short-term solutions. We still have strong reserves of about $11 million. The city is not in crisis. These were built up over the last 10 years of the Senate administration, and I give them credit for doing that after they moved the city away from insolvency during their first 2 years. What is best for the financial strength long-term of our vision becomes reality. What if that happens? If it does, we will have an abundance of family-sustaining jobs, schools where every individual learns that they are a valuable part of the Erie community and they get trained for jobs of the future, a world-class downtown and Bayfront that makes thousands more people want to come to Erie, to live in welcoming, vibrant neighborhoods, and every resident feels that their unique capabilities are valued. The city will actually provide improved services at a lower cost to our transformed city. Thank you very much for what you've already done and the hard work you'll do over the next month to work on this budget. I'm happy to take any questions anybody would have at this time. Liz?
Mayor, are you aware, I think it's interesting that we're going to have an early intervention program 13 years after we had an early intervention program which recommended that the amusement tax be set at 5%. So my question is, what happens when early intervention comes back and says, why didn't you follow the recommendations that were made in 2005 to raise the amusement tax to 5%? I'm not saying right now that I'm in favor of raising the amusement tax from 3% to 5%, but I think it still needs to be looked at. I think that it's an independent authority, which is telling us that they cannot afford to absorb this cost. I happen to work for the Erie Seawolves, so I know that attendance can be a struggle, but I also know that the Seawolves are getting $12 million in state funding to make improvements there, including improvements that should have been made as part of a regular maintenance budget from Erie Events. I assume that some of those improvements, which are always about, entertaining the crowd, will help to stabilize or possibly increase attendance there. So I'm not speaking for the Seawolves. I would like to point out that I think that it's time that council and the mayor's office use the bully pulpit to talk to these independent authorities. I know you have 109, whatever the fee is that they're going to pay for the voluntary fee they're going to pay in building permits. The person who's the executive director of the convention center, Erie Events, does not live in the city of Erie and will not be paying that higher income tax on which city residents are going to be paying. So I think we need more debate about the amusement tax. I know I got a Facebook message from somebody from the Playhouse today making an appeal there. I just don't think we should take the word of the person who's the director of Erie Events and say, okay, yeah, we were also promised when $43 million was put into the arena that we would be getting all these new concerts, and where are they? So that's one of my responses. Also, I think it's great to give the Senate administration credit for building up those reserves, but I think it's also important to point out that the Senate administration is the one that presented a budget last year in which the sewer transfer, whatever that amount was wildly over-projected. So give credit where credit is due, but give criticism where criticism is due. That should have been one of the first signs that we were going to have trouble with this budget. I also want to point out that the increase in the bond payments should not have been a surprise. It was here in the preliminary budget handouts that City Council got when Council approved the budget last year, 7-0. I also am going to press for, I want to see some type of actual transformational cuts here. I've asked about the golf course for months. The golf fund has lost money for 4 out of the last 5 years, and Going back to early intervention, again, 2005, questions raised about the Gulf Fund and why it was losing money. Having a golf course in Harbor Creek is not a core function of government. I do have one, that was kind of more of a statement than a question, but I had a question. You had promised that you were going to be implementing job evaluations as part of your innovations and being mayor. Have those taken place? I know that it may be more difficult with rank and file, but have there been job performance systems put into place for either the rank and file or for management? And if for management, does this budget include across the board pay raises for management, or will any increases be tied to performance reviews? So that's kind of the question I'm coming back to, is what does this budget contain in terms of pay raises for management, and how would those raises be determined? And are there performance evaluations in place?
No, we have not been able to implement performance evaluations yet. I'll let Paul answer the question on what's in there in terms of salary increases.
Salary increases are 3% across the board for everybody except for the Teamsters at this point in time, because they're still in contract negotiations.
What about for management?
3%.
Why? Why?
All the other bargaining units get 3%, and it's the fairness of what goes on with all the employees.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, and what is the city's, one of the things that the early intervention team had pointed out in 2005 is that costs were rapidly exceeding the city's growth rate in terms of revenue. So can you put that in context?
I don't have my book in front of me right now to go line by line, but I have looked at that book multiple times over the last 14 years, and they made some very good suggestions. And as you know, if you've read the book, that we implemented many of those over the last 10 or 12 years. And they did talk about the golf fund. There's also a multitude of other things in there.
I'm talking about the automatic 3%. I hope everybody heard that. There's an automatic 3% across the board for management, because that's fair, because that's what the rank and file is getting. Can you repeat that? That's what the plan is.
Correct.
There's no plan to ask for a pay freeze for people in management, correct?
That's correct.
I think that's something we need to take a look at.
Are there any more questions for the mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We knew it was going to be an interesting budget this year, and as you presented us today, our preliminary budget, we do have a lot of work to do. I look forward to working with my colleagues here and coming to a solution that benefits both the city as well as the citizens of the city. So, colleagues, we've got a lot of work to do, and we'll get at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Anybody else? One thing that I want to say, Mayor, is I thank you and your administration on your work of the budget. And it is a very tough budget. But a lot of things in the budget I disagree with, because one thing that we have to understand, all of us sitting up here, we live in the city too. And whatever affects the city and our citizens, it affects us too. So we really need to think about, come up with some other good ideals, you know, to help manage our budget, because our citizens, our city is living in poverty, a lot of our people. And they can't afford what this budget is trying to do. So I hope we can, in the next month, work together and find other ways to get the money that we need to get our city in the right position.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'm hopeful, and I pray that when we meet to discuss the budget, that we do not cause a detrimental effect in the police and fire department. Those two departments are our major costs, our major operations, and the benefits, etc. Those two departments, we need to look very carefully at and know what we're doing. There's a lot of crime out there, and we definitely need our fire department. So when we look at the budget, look at the percentage that those two departments have, and we move on. There's a lot of concern. Liz is concerned about the golf. Yes, it has been losing. But sometimes you have to lose something to win something. We need to plan. We need not come into the budget session with predetermined ideas. We need to come in with questions and some possible solutions. We knew going into this budget that we will be dealing with a deficit. Let's work on how to resolve that deficit in a fair and equitable manner. Some of the colleagues here always talk about the citizens. I'm a citizen, and I pay taxes. Those who remember in the Tullio era, he fought and lost in court to keep all our employees in the city or working for the city that lives in the city. He lost that. And that still stands today. That's not going to change. So we need to come in with an open mind and do the best we can without pointing fingers and calling names. Thank you.
Madam President.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for presenting this budget to us. It's a challenging budget, to say the least. What we will do as a council is we will go, each liaison will go to their department head and meet with them individually, go line by line through the budget, and I would like this council, if we could, to look for as many cuts as possible before we go to the taxpayers, looking for increases in taxes and fees. I think we need to run the leanest operation that we can at the city before we go and reach out and ask for more from our citizens, because as Mrs. Schaaf pointed in the back, some people, and as Charles Buki pointed in his Erie Refocused report, you know, some people have 1 foot in the city and 1 foot out, and we don't want to push them out of the city by increasing taxes to the detriment of the population of the city and the citizens of the city. That being said, to Mr. Witherspoon's point, we have an operation to run. Police and fire are critical services, and they make up the lion's share of our budget. So any cuts to the discretionary funding is what we need to do. We can't cut police and fire at this point. Our public services were already cut in the past. That's something that we need to maintain and actually look to in the future expand for public safety. We know that our ISO rating for the fire department is the best in the country, in the top 1% of all municipalities. So that's a credit to our fire department and the work that they do, being short-staffed and being, you know, running a lean operation. And so we have our work to do. Thank you for presenting this budget, and we'll be scheduling those budget sessions in the caucus room afterwards today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, for all of your hard work and the financial people who have put it together. I want everyone to know that I will do my very best to help all citizens in Erie by being a part of this process. Thank you.
Okay. Mayor, do you have anything else for us?
No, I have nothing else. I appreciate it. Look forward to working with you to get through the budget. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that takes us to repository sales. Is there anyone here for repository sales?
Thank you, Paul. Okay.
State your name and address.
Crystal Lynn Ross Walters, 1542 East Grandview Boulevard in Erie. And I'm just interested in getting approval to purchase the property at 2230 Parade Street in Erie. It's an area that has been vulnerable to blight, and my family and I would just like to do our part to beautify that small area, continue with, and we had been, along with the city, keeping the property cleaned up and snow removal and mowing and things of that nature. And we'd like to be able to perhaps beautify it with flower gardens and have occasional family gatherings, things of that nature. It's a vacant lot.
Anybody have any questions?
I don't have a question, but I love your vision. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch with you, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else for repository sales? Is there anyone else for repository sales? Last call for repository sales. That takes us to citizens to be heard, and we have two people already signed up. Brian Evans would be first if he's here, and then Rick Lible, if he's here, is next. So are any of those gentlemen here?
I'm here for a complaint.
Can you state your name and address, please, sir?
Brian Evans, 628 East 19th Street, Erie, PA. I was given, the complaint is parking tickets. I was given a ticket, and reading, and I noticed that the ticket was $30. So I looked at the ticket, and it stated, you have committed the parking violation listed above, and if the payment is not received within 10 days, which means they're demanding this money, and if not in 10 days, it will increase. Fines will increase. Failure to pay will result in immobilization, towing at owner's expense. I went to the lady and I talked to her. She said that if you do not pay, that in 10 days that it will raise up to 40, and then it goes up to 50. I mean, this is insane. That you're asking for this much money from us citizens. We do have families. We do have responsibilities. I'm sorry that I made a mistake and, that my mind was so much on priorities. I didn't read the signs. I forgot to read the signs. Or, thanks to the secondhand store investing $30 in a jump pack that I can leave my four-way flashes on, and then if my battery dies, I can jump my car and continue with my business throughout the day. I mean, it's like we're estimating time. You go to the hospital, who knows you're going to be there for an hour, 2 hours, maybe 5 hours, And then you have courthouse. People go to court. That, too, you're estimating time. Who knows that we're going to be there for an hour, 2 hours? Oh, I was extra 5 minutes over the hour. Now I'm penalized for 30 minutes or $30. It's crazy. And to think, where is this money going? Is it going to the city? Is it going to the people of the city? Or is it going to a reimbursement of new vehicles or new uniforms? Or is this money going to et ceteras, as being someone on the inside is doing something else with this money that we don't know about. These businesses are asking for a raise. And the raise is, let's pickpocket the people for more money. It's insane. They should be already high within their stockings. We as citizens should not be in fear as being lemons in the city, to society. We should not be in fear as being lemons to society. We must also realize to think there are unqualified people working in these qualified positions. There are people that are qualified with degrees and still don't qualify. What we need is right people and the right leaders. This pertains to red or yellow, black or white. All I'm saying is we need to start helping the city out. We as citizens, we play a part too within the city. And if you're taking from us, how can we build? We need the right leaders, we need the right people. This is what established organizations. So can you please get in consideration about the parking tickets? It's extremely too high. And in a demand of 10 more dollars, 10 days, if you don't pay it, $40, $50. Oh, we're gonna put a boot on your car. Now that's $50. They said it started at $50, so that's twice. So now you're giving us 3 strikes, we're out. Opposed to what we was getting, 5 chances, 4 to 5 chances? So I'm not criticizing anybody, but we need to focus on getting the right leaders, the right people, right thoughts, so that we can establish the city the way it's supposed to be. That's all I have to say.
Jason Barnell, 4131 McClellan Avenue, Erie, PA 16510. Good morning, Madam President, Erie City Council, Mayor Joe Schember Administration, and fellow citizens. Happy Thanksgiving, City of Erie. I'm forever thankful for Erie City Councilwoman Kathy Schaaf for beginning the process to ban conversion therapy. As we come together to break bread with friends and family, let's have hope and faith that we do not cast out, exclude, or be ashamed of our family members that are coming out to live their truth, or those living their truth with our loved ones. When it comes to budgeting, sometimes, and most likely, luxury and non-generators of revenue are the first to be either looked at, cut, and to be examined. Let's streamline our city services when it comes to non-generator funds, which I know you already do. This might help put down our $11 million deficit. We can grandfather in or combine the golf fund into the Bureau of Parks and Recreation Services. This will not eliminate those 2 positions. Under the direction of Mayor Schemberg with the 5-year fiscal plan, anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million could be saved and the deficit will go down. Running through these numbers was like whenever I was working or worked in the kitchen, worrying about food cost or profit or loss, or how to successfully plan, organize, and execute an event. Act 172, 2016, Volunteer Firefighter Tax Credit from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania was signed into law by Governor Wolf. As House of Representative-elect Bob Murski is at work in Harrisburg, the city of Erie could possibly roll out a tax exemption of 10% property taxes cut for the city of Erie police, fire, and the city of Erie employees who live in the city of Erie to mirror this tax exemption status
and/or to incentivize those who live outside the city of Erie proper that are employees for the city of Erie to move back into the city so the taxes that are generated can pay down that deficit. For all those who reside outside the city proper but work in the city proper should see that income tax raised to 2%. For those who live and reside in the city proper should see it drop to 1%, thus giving another reason to move back into the city. I hope this is not confusing or being misunderstood in any kind of capacity. The Federal Bureau of Investigation released hate crime statistics for 2017, revealing a disturbing increase of 17% in reported hate crimes from the previous year, and so on. November 13, 2018, the Human Rights Campaign released it. In 2017, 7,175 hate crimes incidents were reported, 1,130 of which were based on sexual orientation bias and 119 on gender identity bias. Hate crimes targeting Black people represented 28% of all reported hate crimes in 2017. Hate crimes motivated by anti-religious bias increased 23%, largely driven by a 37% increase in anti-Jewish hate crimes. A simple reminder is that it's not just going to help our municipal quality score raised if we report the statistics that the FBI has from the city of Erie, but it will create the fact that we will have a safer place for those who work, who live, who love and pray, and to feel the ability to go to church without worrying about what happened in Pittsburgh, or go to the Zone Dance Club without what happened in the Pulse nightclub. We just need to make sure that it will raise the score, but also the citizens will be put first in that thought. Gratitude, like faith, is a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it grows, and the more power you have to use it on your behalf. If you do not practice gratefulness, its benefaction will go unnoticed, and your capacity to draw its gift will be diminished. To be grateful is to find blessing in everything. This is the most powerful attitude to adopt, for there are blessings in everything. Thank you to all who serve our city and our nation this week whenever you think about your loved ones. There are individuals that are serving in the military that are serving around this world, and they're not going to be home for the season. And just like those that are homeless on the streets of the city of Erie, let's remind ourselves that there are worse people off in the city of Erie today. Let's hope we have gratitude and blessings that we have for granted this year. Thank you.
Kevin Pastevka, 722 East Grandview in the city. Just here today to try to grasp the overriding logic of what's happening on the east side now in terms of the McBride Viaduct. If I'm understanding it and processing it in my head right, our tax money is being used to demolish the bridge. That same tax money could be used to refurbish the bridge. Despite the many errant reports from all of the mouthpieces of support for demolition, I would say the refusal to have a public hearing by the majority of you where we could look at the actual facts of that situation, that refusal has invalidated whatever we've heard otherwise, because it could have been hashed out in black and white. So the sum of it, it seems to me then, is our tax money is being used to demolish something, and we end up getting nothing. So we can use tax money to refurbish and have a safe walking park of a historic Erie landmark preserved. But instead, that same amount of money is used to give us nothing. So thanks for nothing, right? Thank you.
My name is Freda Tepfer. I live at 1738 West 23rd Street in Erie. I'm a homeowner, I'm a taxpayer, I'm a certified orientation and mobility specialist. I want to mention the current situation that occurs in the city, and I've pointed this out numerous times, that businesses, churches, residential complexes plow their parking lots, and they often leave huge berms of snow that block the sidewalk and take a long time to melt out. I've brought this up repeatedly to the city in numerous forums. The only recourse at this time is just to go and say, move it please, and eventually maybe they can send a letter, and maybe they can do some kind of fine, but that's what it takes when they obstruct the sidewalk. The city is now before you a final passage of a panhandling ordinance which talks about obstructing sidewalks and streets. And penalty for that could be up to $500 fine or 30 days in jail. This seems to me disproportionate, that someone who is panhandling could be subject to $500 fine or up to 30 days in jail, and people can obstruct our sidewalks repeatedly with just please remove the stuff, and it sits there for months. And I can't tell you how many times I have given the names of specific businesses like Teresa's Deli on 32nd and Green Garden, and they don't do anything about it and nothing is done to enforce it. The panhandling ordinance was supposed to go through some kind of study session. Instead, there was an invitation-only forum on homelessness. Where was the actual input by people in the mental health professions and others specifically on the panhandling ordinance? I don't think it's appropriate to pass that ordinance at this time. The current situation is that the city has contracts for curb cut installation. The city contracts with vendors to put in these curb cuts. I have brought to the city's attention a situation on 6th and Walnut where it took over a month for those curb cut installations to be completed, and all four corners were encumbered simultaneously. And the only notification provided to ensure safety of pedestrians was yellow flagging, which is not detectable by a visually impaired pedestrian. Imagine my surprise and horror when I saw last Saturday night all four corners at Melrose and West 39th similarly encumbered by a curb cut installation project with only yellow flagging. And I know that there is an independent traveler who's visually impaired who lives on that block. There's no excuse for the city in its own contracts to be violating its own requirements for notification and accommodation of pedestrians during construction. The city is proposing no business fees. I disagree with that. Sure, small businesses, startups, they should not have to pay that fee, but we have lots of larger businesses with larger payrolls, larger gross income. Those businesses should pay a fee. I think it's ridiculous that I'm being asked to pay $20 additional in solid waste fees and my earned income tax is increased and nothing is increased on businesses. I think similarly, businesses who are granted easements to encumber our sidewalks for eating outside should have to pay a fee. I feel that anybody who is being given the city right-of-way through a vacation should have to compensate the city for that. We should be looking for ways for income that makes sense. I request that the City Council separate out under new business items 4 and 5. The council shouldn't have to deviate from the typical process here and at their own initiative direct the solicitor to call for this rezone. I think you should more carefully look at this rezone. The rezone is not really dependent on just the property owner's pie-in-the-sky proposal to you. As you know, in the past, not everything proposed to you has occurred. There's an opportunity to retain vegetation on site. There's an opportunity there to protect area equal to the amount vacated in the alleyways of native habitat or other vegetation to improve stormwater and habitat for Cascade Creek. Also, please seek with Penelec to provide lighting of the pedestrian areas of the underpasses at Cherry, Liberty, Ash, and Parade. The pedestrian portion of those underpasses have no lighting at this time. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm here today to discuss two areas of concern where I think there is tax relief for the
Excuse me,
city.
sir. Your name and address?
Excuse me. Jim McGoey, 7 West 41st Street, Erie. Two areas of relief, tax relief, that I think the city should look at. Number one, the underassessed property that sells in an arm's length transaction. This isn't the first list that I've compiled and handed out. I would hope that you people would take the time to look at it, and I'm going to explain it to you. The first column, and I purposely left the addresses off. I had the addresses on the master sheet. I didn't want to get any homeowner in trouble. That's why I did that. The first column is the actual sales price. The second column is the adjusted sales price. And it's adjusted because the state gives us a common level ratio, and that factor is 93%. And what that does, the assessment went into effect January of 2013. So we've had 7% inflation from that time. So in that column there, I backed out that 7%. The third column is the actual assessment. And the fourth column, the most important that you should be looking at, is the taxable difference. And you can see these are not all upscale houses. Now, some of you may say, well, the school district takes care of that. They challenge its assessments. They do. But here's the problem. The school district's criteria is they do not go after anything unless they're going to lose $3,000 in taxes. Now, $3,000 in taxes represents about $180,000 in assessment. So you can see the problem here. Now, on this list, there's 77 properties. There's 3 of them where the difference exceeds $180,000. So there's 74 properties on this list alone that the school district isn't going to pick up. Folks, what's right? How many of you folks knew about the sale in Southeast Erie for $10.5 million? And the property was assessed at $3,200,000. No hands. Nobody knew about it. That's the problem. Those properties are out there. That's our tax dollars that we aren't collecting. The school district challenged that property. That assessment got raised to $8 million. My point is, the city should look long and hard at this, going after these properties. You do all these outside studies with all these high-priced people, and they all tell you this and they tell you that. What do companies want when they're moving into a new town? They want quality of life for their employees. Why would you have quality of life if your next door neighbor's paying 35 or 45 or 50% less in taxes per year than you are. It's something to think about, folks, and it's a source of revenue, a legitimate source of revenue for the city. I attached my card to all these papers. If anybody wants to sit down with me, I'd be more than happy to. The second issue, daytime garbage collection versus the current nighttime collection. Years ago, when I had a copy of the budget, that was a considerable amount of money. I think it was in the neighborhood of $300,000, and I could stand corrected on that. My point is, why are we collecting garbage at night when we have to pay a transfer fee? The landfill's not open. That garbage gets dumped and it gets transferred and it gets taken to the landfill during the day. Why don't we collect it during the day and eliminate that transfer fee altogether? It's simple. Mayor, I listened to some of your suggestions in how you wanted to raise money in your proposed budget. When you look at these things, they're incidental. I mean, we're talking about some major dollars here. I would hope that somebody would sit down and realize what's here, and let's move forward with it. Thank you for your time, and happy Thanksgiving to all.
Same to you, sir.
Same to you.
Good morning. My name is Sean Lynch. I live at 860 East 28th Street. A week ago, a gentleman came to my front door and said that wanted to inquire about the house next door. The house next door is a blighted property, and it was owned by somebody who's had blighted properties torn down and sold before. And I wasn't home. My wife talked to him. Just wanted to know about the property and everything, and anybody living there. But I look at the newspaper in August when I see the delinquent taxes, and I even look at the list for the repository sales and things. And I did happen to see the particular property on the repository sales, but I didn't know that a sale was actually couldn't happen last week. Otherwise, well, a few years ago, the neighbor 2 doors down, and we had talked about, if this property ever came up, hey, split the cost of, whatever they're going to, if it had to be torn down or something like that, to do that, and then we would expand our driveways because we both had shared driveways with other people. So and that would have been a really real improvement for the neighborhood, I think. With the blighted property, we've had property across the street, which has been for sale for over 3 years. A property where 3 doors down from that a divorced couple sold for way under, just because they were distressed sellers. They had to get rid of the property. They couldn't afford multiple mortgages. But anyway, the gentleman on the other side of the blighted property ended up selling his house for $40,000. And that was a shocker. In the past, 8 years, we've put over $30,000 worth of repairs and things to our house, partly because of a burglary where we had to put the glass block windows in the basement because that's how the burglars got in. My wife suffers from COPD and things, so we got central air conditioning. But we've done, repaired the supports for the porch because we were worried that it was gonna, one porch support might collapse and end up throwing bricks all over the cars in the driveway. So, but anyway, what I'm after a number of things is, I'm not a fan of the citywide LRTA. I had to do this, you know, we take loans out, we pay the bills off because we have to do that. I think that people who can afford to do the things like that, that is going to, I don't know, years ago when I was took leadership here, there was a Myron Orfield, one of the books that was required for our class, and it was Metropolitics. And it talked about how a lot of the people who come into an area, they get townships to bargain against boroughs and cities, just get the best deal. And eventually, you know, somebody from this borough moves to that township, or that township moves to this borough, or the city to the suburbs. And a lot of it is just looking for civil servants willing to do their bidding, and the suburbs not having the legal resources to keep from this happening. Anyway, but and another issue that I think I don't have a lot of faith that the state of Pennsylvania is going to raise the minimum wage. But I think that's something that should be looked at here, because people who are employers here in town are paying $3 more than $3 more an hour across the border in New York, and it's $1.15, I think, more that they're paying workers in Ohio. Thank you very much for your time, and a joyous Thanksgiving to all.
Thank you. You too.
Michael Keys, 3612 Reed Street. First, I would like to answer Mr. Evans' question. The answer is that they doubled the parking fines so that they could pay for the new meter system. The parking fine so that they could pay for the new meter system. And so what I tried to point out, but it obviously went on deaf ears, was that most of that $800,000 that we collect in our city for parking tickets comes from, not from those meters, but from the people who live in odd, even parking situations in the northern parts of our cities, who don't have off-street parking, who do not have parking, do not have driveways. And so if they don't move their vehicle by 8 o'clock in the morning, or switch it, or if they get sick, or if there's a snowstorm, they get a ticket. And the answer to your question is, you're the low-hanging fruit. That's where they think that they should fill the gaps in the budgets and for their projects. Two, the budget. You know, one of the things we can do is take citywide LRTA off the table. The two Bayfront properties, once they're fully developed, will drive $6 million each in revenue just through taxes. So my question is, and I've looked at some of the things, is what I've yet to see is an estimated expansion of the real property, and that plugged in to the deficit numbers. Because if we have an extra $1 billion worth of property to tax, then our taxes aren't going to be what they're shown to be today, if we tax them. And so I would say definitely take those things off the table, because that revenue could be used to make sure our city stays solvent. And Third, CBAs. If we're going to collect more money from each individual worker, it benefits everybody that each individual worker brings home a bigger paycheck. So if we go to community benefits agreements that raises the income of the people who live in the city proper, it will generate more revenue. And if you saw, just by raising the earned income, that small increment, it was going to bring in far more money than even a substantial raise in property taxes. And so those are things I think we should look at. You know, I even think it should be looked at as a vehicle to even go higher and then do a reduction in property tax, since, you know, they changed the law where you could do, you know, the homestead, you can increase the homestead part and that you don't have to tax. And so those are just ideas. But I think that when we drive revenue, if the people work, people make money, the city's a better city. And this is just my feeling about the parking, that instead of raising the $30, I know you already did it, but if you raised it where there were parking meters and used that money to pay for your parking meters, it would be a lot more just than spreading it out over the parts of the city where largely low-income people live and don't have any other choices, including to pay for those parking tickets or be booted. Thank you.
Good morning. My name's John Whaley. I live at 447 Gordon Lane in Erie. I think I've been to about 30 city council meetings in the last decade, probably far more. And I probably repeated myself ad nauseum. If you want to remember what I said, you can go look at the tapes. So once again, it's budget time. We're confronted with a tough revenue situation, a tough cost situation. And it looks like there were some ideas bandied about. I don't know if you went through the whole budget like you used to do, you know, in 2 separate meetings at night. I watched the city's Twitter page, I watched the Facebook page. I'm not seeing the updates that I thought I'd see. So 87% of the cost in the city of Erie to run the city are salaries and benefits. According to what I've read so far and heard, and somebody in the hallway told me there'll be 6 jobs lost through attrition this year. If 87% of your costs are salary and benefit, then an old philosopher, Occam's razor, he came up with this idea that sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution. And it's always the best solution, really. So if that's your biggest driver in cost, then you need to attack that. And I don't think we've attacked that. I think we've hemmed and hawed and come up with some excuses, and we can't do this and we can't do that. I don't think we'll solve the problem until we get out of the mindset that we have to run it like we did last year. We have to run it like we did a decade ago. I just looked up the census, and in the last 7 years, our population's dropped 4%. We're 97,000. I'm not even sure if that's the right number. I think it's going to keep going down. How are we reacting to that? Are we collecting trash differently? Are we staffing differently? Are we using data to put the police where they probably should be, knowing where things are going to happen? Or are we doing things like we've always done? I posted a picture on Facebook last week of a city worker in a city car driving to Mill Creek doing personal business, not during what I understand from working in this building for 2 years as being lunchtime. And it got poo-pooed and laughed about, and in the hallway I was just made fun of that, you know, why do you do that? Because it's important. Because 87% of our costs, we're not managing that. Are there union rules? Yeah, but I've read all the union books from front to back. Not one of them says people don't have to work. Not one of them says you can't manage the process, that you can't change things. So the last mayor was adverse to cutting because it set off a cavalcade of this person bounced from and you laid somebody off. This person would bounce and bounce and bounce, and you'd end up with people in the finance office that had no finance experience. You'd have people in the parking ticket office that had no parking ticket experience. And maybe we're afraid to do that again. But I think the only way out of this hole is to really look deep at the #1 driver of cost. If we keep taxing, we raise taxes, pretty sure a property tax increase is queued up for next year already, so we've put a Band-Aid on it now, and next year we'll hit all the taxpayers that do pay property taxes with an increase, because we'll have more costs next year. I think it's untenable. I think people will keep leaving. Guy like me, when my kids graduate from college, I think, boy, I'd like to sell my house and maybe make some money like you do in most other cities in the country. I think I'll sell my house for what I paid for it 10 years ago. And that's sad. I'd like to be able to think that that's your #1 asset and you can make some money. And it's very hard in this town. And lastly, there's a million things I could talk about. One of the reasons that we are in this budget hole is, I believe 4 years ago, might have been 5, City Council approved refinancing and rolling over $50 million in old bonds. Bonds that came from the year 2000, 2001, 2002. We rolled them up and took them to PNC and they refinanced it. And now, instead of paying those off in 2015, 2018, we're going to pay them off in 2030. And we did it, and you approved it, with no payments the first year, almost no payment the second year, a little payment the third year. Now next year's a big payment, $7.6 million, I believe, in interest. We're having a hard time swallowing that. And the way that we're going to balance the budget is we're going to roll over more debt. We're looking anywhere. Oh, there's a bond we can refinance. That bond was probably used for cop cars and paving. The cop cars are gone, the paving's crap. So let's roll it over and let's pay it off in another 15 years. Let's hobble my children. Let's hobble the people that haven't even thought of moving to Erie yet. Thank you.
Are there any more citizens to be heard? Are there any more citizens to be heard? Last call for citizens to be heard.
Here's one.
How do I put it on speaker? How do I put this on speaker, Cass?
Taxpayer hotline, can I help?
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, you're all set then.
And that takes us to ordinances for final passage.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Yes. Good. Good talking. Council File 16049, official ordinance number 42, 2018. An ord...
16049, official ordinance number 42, 2018.
Turn his phone on mute.
Excuse him.
Cash, you gotta turn your TV off, it's echoing in here.
Chick. Paying attention.
Can you hear me?
Days
Yeah, I'm turning it down now.
Okay.
Put his phone on mute.
Or put it on mute.
He got to go.
Put it on mute. I'm not on. Okay, I'm okay now, Rose.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not on my computer, that's why.
Okay, good. All right, let's start again. Council File 16049, official ordinance number 42, 2018, and an ordinance approving the plan of the Erie Sewer Authority for the issuance of an aggregate amount not to exceed 65 million sewer revenue notes, taxable series of 2018, and sewer revenue notes, tax exempt series of 2018, and setting forth the amount, interest rates, and maturity dates with the bonds, authorizing the authority to proceed with the plan of financing, authorizing the execution and delivery of a lease agreement, including extending the lease term and the incurrence of lease rental debt thereby, authorizing the specified officers of the City of Erie to prepare and certify the debt statement, amending the Articles of Incorporation of the Erie Sewer Authority, and to do all other acts necessary to carry out the provisions of the ordinance, setting forth the payment of the sewer revenue notes and the source of such payments, repealing all inconsistent ordinances, and providing that the ordinance is effective immediately. By Ms. Allen, second by Mr. Winarski, that council file ordinance bill number 16049, and now known as official file ordinance number 42, 2018, be finally passed by the City Council. Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Mursky, Ms. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mrs. Arrington. City Council passed official file ordinance number 42, 2018, finally by yeas 7, nays 0. Council File 16050, official ordinance number 43, 2018. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Erie, Erie County, Pennsylvania, defining panhandling, prohibiting panhandling in certain places and in certain manners, providing a penalty for violating the ordinance, providing for the repeal of inconsistent ordinances, providing for the severability of the ordinance, and providing the effective date of the ordinance.
Excuse me, Madam President, can we take this off for a final vote?
Are you making a motion to table? What are you doing?
Yes. In light of the fact that this is an ongoing panhandling discussion started by Renee Lamus when we talked about homelessness, and I believe we're in the process of still talking about panhandling, and we haven't come up to a final conclusion as to how to address this.
Madam Secretary, I'd like to chime in also. And I voted for first reading for the panhandling ordinance, and I do believe we need some more discussion. I know Bob couldn't be there last week at the homelessness thing, and actually it was because of his bringing to light this issue that we really have a lot of forward momentum. I know at the session last week, it became a broader discussion, and there was a lot of emphasis on the fact that not all panhandlers are homeless, and obviously not all homeless people do panhandling, but there were some really good suggestions there in terms of day work programs, implementing some things that have been done in other cities where you have meters where you could actually contribute to the various agencies that are dealing with those who are down on their luck, or cards that you could hand out. I was the one, I think, who I asked the question about the number of aggressive panhandlers, but it turned out that I wasn't the only one. There were a couple of other people at that meeting who were asking the police officer who, I think it's Officer Laura who's working on this. He made really good presentations, but I wasn't the only one who would like some numbers about the number of aggressive panhandlers. There were questions about whether you would get a warning first, and I know that's not in the ordinance. What I would like to suggest is that we wait on this till at least we have one or two other meetings or reports from that group that was brought together, and then we would feel like we had the data to go forward. I do think I know that there are concerns about aggressive actions by some people who are downtown, but also the perception that downtown is unsafe. And I think that there are existing laws right now where perhaps at a news conference, that officer could make clear that if you touch somebody, if you do something that could be perceived as physical assault, that you will be dealt with by the law. And also, anyhow, I'm not prepared to vote yes, even though I voted yes on first read, because I thought we would get some more clear guidance from that meeting that Kathy and I attended. Bob couldn't go because he was doing some training for the state, but it certainly sparked a really, and Sonia was there also at the meeting, so there were 3 city council people there. It certainly really was informative, in-depth. We learned a lot about all the different resources that are out there, and to Freda's concern about mental health, there were representatives of the various mental health agencies there. We're getting a handle on this, and we're going to figure out how to make sure that downtown is safe, that it's perceived as safe, and that you don't take aggressive actions. But anyhow, I'm with Kathy to at least, I would approve a motion to table this, but I don't know what we'll get.
Second her motion?
I will second Kathy's motion to table.
Madam President?
Yes.
Just to remind council and to remind the citizens, we did have a study session on this. This was brought forward by the residents of downtown, by the people who live in Tulio Towers and Mid-City Towers who are being harassed when they go to the bank, when they go to Dollar General. And it was brought to us by the Downtown Partnership, who have cited time after time, and the businesses downtown who have said that this is a problem. And I think it's irresponsible for us to just, because we've had one meeting, say, well, now it's not a problem. It's an ongoing problem, as evidenced by, or that the problem's going to resolve itself by having a meeting with the social service agencies. When we had the study session, we agreed that it was an and both approach, that we were going to set clear expectations that panhandling is not acceptable in our city, and work with the social service agencies who have been here for generations in our downtown, but have not effectively addressed the issue. And now that they're working for the first time under the direction of the administration together, instead of in silos, to address the issue of panhandling in relation to all the other social ills that come with homelessness. And I'm glad to hear that it was mentioned that not all panhandlers are homeless and not all homeless people are panhandlers, because the evidence shows that that's clearly not true. A lot of our homeless people do not panhandle. But this was brought to us by the business community in downtown, and the mayor's vision for our downtown is a world-class downtown. Every world-class downtown that I've been to has clear anti-panhandling ordinances.
Madam Secretary, I just want to make clear that this is, Madam Secretary, I watched that show on TV on Sunday night. Anyhow, Madam President, I do want to clarify that the ordinance does not ban panhandling, because that would be an infringement on First Amendment rights. It bans aggressive panhandling. Just to make sure that everybody understands this, that this is not a ban on panhandling or asking for money. So, anyhow, just want to make that clear.
Well, I think that we should go ahead on and pass it, because we can always, once we learn more about how we can handle this, we can always go in and tweak the ordinance, you know. So I think we need to get something on the books. I think we should just go ahead on and just pass it, and then whenever we get more knowledge of what else we can do, we can always tweak it.
We still have to vote on the
Yes.
motion to table, though, correct? And then we vote on the ordinance? Okay.
Okay, there's a motion to table by Mrs. Schaaf, seconded by Ms. Allen. Ms. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. Kwiatkowski?
No.
Mr. Mursky?
No.
Ms. Schaaf?
I still, yes.
Mr. Winarski?
No.
Mr. Witherspoon?
No.
Mrs. Arrington?
No.
All right, well, this motion will adopt 5-2. So then we'll go ahead and vote on the ordinance. By Mr. Mursky, second by Mr. Kwiatkowski, the Council File Ordinance Bill Number 16050, now known as Official File Ordinance Number 43, 2018, be finally passed by the City Council. Ms. Allen?
No.
Mr. Kwiatkowski? Mr. Mursky? Mrs. Schaaf?
No, because I strongly believe it's still a work in progress.
Mr. Winarski? Mr. Witherspoon? Mrs. Arrington? All right, this ordinance will adopt. File ordinance 43, 2018 will adopt finally by yeas 5, nays 2. Thanks, Bob. Council file number 16051, official ordinance number 44, 2018, an ordinance appropriating the sum of $40,200 from unappropriated and unanticipated revenue and providing for the expenditure thereof, General Obligation Bond Fund 2015. By Mr. Mursky, seconded by Mr. Kwiatkowski, the council file ordinance bill number 16051, now known as official file ordinance number 44, 2018, be finally passed by the City Council. Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Mursky, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mrs. Arrington. City Council passed official file ordinance number 44, 2018, finally by yea 7, nay 0. Council File 16053, official ordinance number 46, 2018, an ordinance in accordance with the 2018 City of Erie budget, the sum of $400,000 is appropriated from unappropriated and unanticipated revenue for use by the City of Erie Fire Department in the Fire Equipment Program Fund. These funds will be used to purchase a fire pumper truck. These funds will be used in conjunction with those also appropriated from the capital fund. These funds were received by the City of Erie from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development.
Madam President,
Yes.
I just wanted to publicly thank Representative Pat Harkins for putting in to the DCED the request for these funds for our city. $400,000 will go a long way in our fire department to purchasing new equipment. We desperately need a new fire truck.
By Mrs. Schaaf, seconded by Mr. Winarski, the council file ordinance bill number 16053, and now known as official file ordinance number 46, 2018, be finally passed by the City Council. Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Mursky, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mrs. Arrington. City Council passed official file ordinance number 46, 2018, finally by yea 7, nay 0. Council file number 16054, official ordinance number 47, 2018. An ordinance in accordance with the 2018 City of Erie Capital Fund budget, the sum of $343,603 is appropriated from unappropriated and unanticipated revenue for use by the City of Erie Fire Department. These funds will be used to purchase a fire pumper truck. By Ms. Schaaf, second by Mr. Winarski, the council file ordinance bill number 16054, now known as official file ordinance number 47, 2018, be finally passed by the City Council. Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Mursky, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mrs. Arrington. City Council passed official file ordinance number 47, 2018, finally by yea 7, nay 0. Council file number 16055, official ordinance number 48, 2018, appropriating the sum of $98,048 from appropriated and anticipated revenue from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, for firefighting, training, and rescue equipment. By Mrs. Schaaf, second by Mr. Winarski, the council file ordinance bill number 16055, and now known as official file ordinance number 48, 2018, be finally passed by the City Council. Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Mursky, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mrs. Arrington. City Council pass official file ordinance number 48, 2018, finally by yeas 7, nays 0. Council File 16056, official ordinance number 49, 2018, an ordinance appropriating the sum of $15,000 from unappropriated and unanticipated revenue for the expenditure thereof. Contribution is from the Erie Community Foundation Helping Today grant for the purpose of a problem property database. By Mr. Mursky, second by Mr. Kwiatkowski, that Council File Ordinance Bill number 16056, and now known as official file ordinance number 49, 2018, be finally passed by the City Council. Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Mursky, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mrs. Arrington. City Council passed official file ordinance number 49, 2018, finally by yeas 7, nays 0. Ordinances for first reading. Council file number 16057, an ordinance fixing the tax rate for all city purposes for the fiscal year 2019, beginning on January 1st, 2019, and ending on December 31st, 2019.
Madam President, is this the one that we pulled, or?
No.
Oh, we didn't pull this one? Okay. Madam President?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to answer.
Oh, that's okay. I'd like to make a motion to table 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. We just got the budget. The reason being, we just got the budget, and I'm not prepared to set rates, even though we can change them. Usually, historically, we've done these the 2 meetings in December, and so I'd like to review the budget before we go over and put things on the record. That's just my personal opinion. I hope I can get a second on that.
I will second that.
Madam Chair, don't we have to do that one at a time?
Number 1 and 2 normally go on at the same time as we get the budget report from the mayor's office.
Okay.
And then they don't go back on till final passage until our final meeting on or before December 31st.
Okay. Well, then, all right. Then I'll change my motion to
Okay.
4, 5, and 6. Or were those pulled?
I'll tell you what was pulled was number 5,
Okay.
the income tax.
4, 5, and 6.
So you want your motion to, should we wait until we get to
We'll wait till we
number 4?
get there, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, and I apologize.
That's okay. Okay. All right, then. These are ordinances for first reading. Council file, I've read that. Let me start again, though. Council file number 16057, an ordinance fixing the tax rate for all city purposes for the fiscal year 2019, beginning on January 1st, 2019, and ending on December 31st, 2019. By Mrs. Arrington, second by Mr. Winarski, the council file ordinance number 16057, having been read, is hereby adopted on first reading by the City Council. Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Mursky, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mrs. Arrington. City Council read and adopt council file ordinance number 16057 by yeas 7, nays 0 on first reading. Council File 16058, an ordinance of the City of Erie, County of Erie, and Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, adopting the general fund and certain other budgets for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2019, and ending December 31st, 2019. By Mrs. Arrington, second by Mr. Winarski, the council file ordinance number 16058, having been read, is hereby adopted on first reading by the City Council. Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Mursky, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mrs. Arrington. City Council read and adopt council file ordinance number 16058 by yeas 7, nays 0 on first reading. Council file number 16059, an ordinance appropriating the sum of $18,801.67 from unappropriated and anticipated revenue to be received as program income generated by the Enterprise Zone Revolving Loan Fund for utilization in the flagship fund.
Madam President,
Yes.
I wanted to let people know this is revenue generated from interest off our Enterprise Revolving Loan Fund, where we loan money to small businesses who are in the city to expand and create jobs, and then they pay it back. And what we're doing is putting it in the flagship fund, which the administration has. It's a new grant program for startup businesses to receive a small grant to help them with those startup costs. And this is a great seed money for a lot of our that entrepreneurial ecosystem that we're trying to build. So thank you, administration, and I was glad to work with you on this.
By Mr. Murkowski, seconded by Mr. Kwiatkowski. The council file ordinance number 16059, having been read, is hereby adopted on first reading by the City Council. Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Mursky, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mrs. Arrington. City Council read and adopt council file ordinance number 16059 by yeas 7, nays 0 on first reading.
Madam President.
Yes.
So just, if I could ask the clerk, we decided, I think we wanted to pull all three, correct?
Yes.
We're just going
The
to...
will of council was to pull these in the back.
Okay.
Thank
Well,
you.
then we'll note that council file 16060, 16061, and 16062 have been pulled by council. Now, some of these didn't get sponsored. These are okay. Some of these didn't get sponsored. In the back, so let me see.
Were they Kaz's?
No, I got him to sign everything yesterday. This is Wiz and Winarski. If you could sign that and pass it down, and then all these will go to council president.
So where, do I pass this down to Jim then?
Yeah.
Or do you? Okay.
Thank you.
Are we not voting on the budget?
Okay, these are all by you. I think we're all covered with that. Oops, I'm sorry. Those go back to Simon when you're done.
Who, me?
Yeah.
These rows.
No, these are, oh, these are first readings, you just have to sign them. Okay. Now, that'll
So
take
where
us,
are we on
we
the
pulled,
budget?
we pulled these three.
We approved the preliminary budget.
Huh?
We pulled the sewer,
Watering.
sewer and water. We pulled the earned income tax and the garbage fees. Those are. Okay,
Well,
so.
I'm not in favor of pulling that. So if that needs to be the record now, that might be the feeling of the majority.
Well, if we want to make a vote, I mean, we can vote to table it, I don't care.
Okay, we want to
Yeah.
do them
I think that's the best way to do it.
Okay. All right, then, we'll probably have to do these separately.
I'd like to make a motion to pull 4, 5, and 6.
Okay, but you already.
Can I do it together?
We're good with
We make a motion to move the balance of the agenda, so I make a motion to pull 4, 5, and 6 under, or to
Okay.
table 4, 5, and 6 under first reading. Yeah. That's what that's what Mel
You wanna
would
do them all
prefer.
together or
Yeah.
separately?
All together, is everyone good with that? Can we do that, Mr. Betza?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
There's 3 ordinances that they'd like to, Bob has a motion on, to table.
Can we table them as a package?
You can.
Thank you.
Now, if, you can, as long as everybody's voting, if somebody says, I'm only inclined to want to table number 5, not number 6, speak now, otherwise. If everyone's agreeable to tabling them or not tabling them as a package, that's fine. If we disagree, I want to table 4 but not 5, and somebody else wants to table 5 and not 4, then we would need to do individual votes.
I don't want to table any of them, so let's do it individually.
No, package. If you're going to vote no on all of them, I think everyone else is voting to table.
You could do that as a package, as long as you're saying, I want to table all 3, or I don't want to table all 3.
So moved.
Disagree.
Do you have a second?
I have a second on that one.
Thank you.
Okay, then, we have motion to table by Mr. Mursky and second by Ms. Schaaf. Ordinance council file numbers 16060, 061, and 062. Ms. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. Kwiatkowski? Are you there, Kaz?
Yeah, I'm there. Well, are we tabling 2 or 3 of them? It's hard to hear here.
Okay, there's 3
4, 5, and 6, wasn't it?
3 ordinances that are going to be tabled as a package. Ordinances 60, 61, and 62.
Yes.
And those were the water and sewer garbage fees and the earned income tax. And council has said that they will, they'll table that as a package with all 3. So my question to you is, we're voting on the table, so.
Please put me down for yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Mursky, Ms. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski.
I want it tabled.
Okay. Mr. Winarski.
So be it.
Mr. Witherspoon.
No.
Mrs. Arrington. Okay, motion to table passes 6-1. Okay, now we'll go into new business.
Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to move the balance of the agenda.
I'll second that.
Are there any separations?
All right, voting on moving the balance of the agenda. Ms. Allen, Ms. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Mursky, Ms. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mrs. Arrington. We do have 3 waive rules, Madam President.
Okay.
Just late entries, Mr. Mursky was in training down in Harrisburg. Okay, and the first wave rules will be, Mr. Mursky has a appointment, or no, lien forgiveness. So voting on waiving the rules for resolution number 424, Ms. Allen, Ms. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Mursky, Ms. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mrs. Arrington. By Mr. Mursky, seconded by Mr. Kwiatkowski, resolved by the Council of the City of Erie that the mayor and other appropriate city officials are hereby authorized to release any and all City of Erie liens against the property known as 1534 Parade Street, Erie, PA, upon conveyance of the property by the Redevelopment Authority of the City of Erie to the Lower East Side Iron Eagles under an agreement by which the Lower East Side Iron Eagles agree to remit annual payments to the City of Erie, County of Erie, and Erie School District in an amount not less than the product of the current land portion of the property's assessed value as calculated by Erie County Board of Assessment multiplied by the applicable tax rate of each taxing body. Discussion?
Madam President, I just wanted to, this was what Scott Henry talked about, and also I don't know if the Lower East Side Federation reached out to anybody individually. This has been off the tax rolls. It's been in the Redevelopment Authority's hands for over 2 decades. It's been sitting there vacant. The Lower East Side Federation wants to put up a pole barn and start youth programs there. They want to build a boxing gym and a facility for youth of that Parade Street area, much like they had back in the 70s. They want to get back into helping our young people. This property, this was brought to me by Scott Henry from the Redevelopment Authority. He endorsed the project, and so that's why I brought it forward. I believe we got an email on it it was like over the summertime.
Madam President, I am voting no on this, not because I don't think it's a good project, but I just happened to be at the East Side Federation, I think two weeks ago. No one mentioned anything to me. It sounds like a great idea. I don't know why we got it, in caucus today. So my no vote is not a vote against the project. It's a vote against lack of information. If we are going to ask and demand more timely information from the administration, we have to make sure we do it ourselves too. So I appreciate the thought and the prayer. No, I appreciate the thought. Sounds like a good project, but I don't want to vote on something that I'm not familiar with, so.
All right, roll call. Ms. Allen?
No.
Mr. Kwiatkowski? Mr. Mursky? Mrs. Schaaf? Mr. Winarski? Mr. Witherspoon? Mrs. Arrington? This resolution will adopt 6-1. Okay, now to the second wave rules would be an appointment by Mr. Mursky to the Sewer Authority. So voting to waive the rules on resolution number 25, Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Mursky, Ms. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mrs. Arrington. By Mr. Mursky, seconded by Mrs. Schaaf, resolved by the Council of the City of Erie that John Savelli of 160 West 8th Street, Erie, is hereby appointed to the Sewer Authority for the first term, which will expire 12/31/2023. Discussion?
I'll second it.
No discussion?
Madam President, I would like to discuss. I will vote yes for this. I know John. I also know the people that Mel recommended to Blighted Property Review Committee. I would really like to see council change its procedures, though, for appointing people to authorities. Kathy and I have had very good luck in trying to reach out to let people know when there are vacancies on authorities. I think that despite the fight that broke out over the EMTA appointments, if you look at the story in the paper today, some really good candidates came forward for the mayoral appointments to EMTA and for the county executive appointments. So I'm voting yes, but for 2019, this will be one of my top priorities, is to change the way appointments are made to authorities. We need to make sure that ordinary citizens are invited to apply for these vacancies. They're volunteer positions, so it does require a time commitment, but that's all I have to say about that.
Roll call. Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Mursky, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mrs. Arrington. This resolution will adopt 7-0. And that takes us to Resolution 26. This is a a portion of McClellan Park to be dedicated to Sister Rita Rocky. So voting on waiving the rules. Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Mursky, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mrs. Arrington. By Mr. Mursky, second by Ms. Schaaf, resolved by the Council of the City of Erie that the proper city officials are authorized and directed to designate a portion of McClellan Park as Sister Rita Brocky Way. Sister Rita Brocky was instrumental in the development of McClellan Park and has also co-founded the House of Mercy on Erie's east side. Discussion?
Madam President,
Yes.
this was brought to me by the Burton Deal Neighborhood Association. Sister Rita is now in the infirmary at the Mercy Mother House, Sisters of Mercy Mother House. And they wanted to recognize her for all her work. Not only she was instrumental in procuring the grant that developed the master plan for McClellan Park, she also was a strong advocate for that neighborhood, both with her work at the JFK Center and her work with the House of Mercy in that neighborhood. And so I thought this was a fitting way to recognize her for all of her efforts with the East Side and particularly with that neighborhood.
I agree with you, Mr. Mursky. I had the pleasure of working with Sister Rita on several events, and I agree with that.
All right, roll call. Ms. Allen, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mr. Mursky, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mrs. Arrington. This resolution will adopt 7-0, and that will take us to committee reports, Madam President.
Okay, we're going to start with Mr. Mursky.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to let the citizens know that this will be my last meeting officially as a councilman. I have to resign November 30th, and my letter will be in announcing my resignation due to the fact that I start at the state December 1st for the transition, a month transition. I want to thank the citizens of the city of Erie. I want to thank both Mayor Sinnott and Mayor Schember and all of the elected officials and staff here at City Hall. This has been a joy, and my wife calls it an illness. Public service, she said, you take a beating in the criticism from the community, but I love what I do, and nothing has been a greater honor in my life than serving the people of this community. Local government especially has a fond place in my heart because it's where you can directly impact your own hometown, your own community in ways that are immediate and in ways that are substantial for the people that live here. And I will always treasure my time here. I want to thank my colleagues, both past and present, and I want to thank especially the clerk's office, Rose, our city clerk, and Mr. Clem, our former clerk, for guiding me through the last 7 years. So it's been an honor to serve as a councilman, and I look forward to serving you as your next state representative. We need to bring leadership to Harrisburg that has Erie values, and I pledge to do that. And I also pledge to work with this council and the administration to bring tax dollars back to Erie for those transformative projects. We have a lot of good things going on that are going to require state funding, and I know with Representative Harkins, we will work hard to bring those dollars back to our community. Thank you.
Excuse me, I think Kaz has something to say about the phone. Maybe he wants to get off of it or something.
Kaz, you there?
Yeah, I'm going to cut out because the connection's getting a little bad. I just want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and I'll see you when I get back, and I will have a lot of questions. And thank you for all of you for being asking the questions you did. I'm very pleased with that. I'll see you when I get back.
Thanks. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
See you, Kaz.
Yeah, okay. I went to the Velocity Net open house on Friday night. That was an amazing transformation of a building that was visibly blighted. It's not just the transformation of the building, but it's the addition of jobs that will be coming there. I asked the building person who took us on a tour of the place what was the worst thing that they found inside. He said it was dead pigeons that a hawk kept dropping in there. So when you see, you're going to see what's on the outside there. You see the big light that says V-neck. That's a very positive development for our city. After that, I went to hear James and Deborah Fallows speak at Gannon as part of the Jefferson Society Global Summit. One of the things that struck me was they were asked a couple of questions. What would they specifically recommend about Erie? And I thought Deborah Fallows had a very pertinent comment when she talked about, she grew up in Vermilion, Ohio. She said where the whole waterfront was accessible no matter what your income was. There were, low-cost ways to learn how to sail a boat. I mean, everything they've written about Erie has been very positive, but she talked about the disconnect between Presque Isle and some citizens in the city of Erie. I think that that's something that we need to take to heart and think about in terms of how we look at the east side and how do we have access to the Bayfront and also Presque Isle. Which brings me to my third point. This isn't a committee report, but I was surprised to read in the paper that the Port Authority, which is an independent authority, is moving ahead with seeking bids to demolish the McAllister building. In 2015, the Port Authority had an RFP to either demolish the building or have it actually redeveloped. Got nobody then. I am shocked that they went ahead with this before we received the report from the Urban Land Institute, which in its initial, a lot of us spent time being interviewed by these panelists who bring various types of expertise to the city. Their expertise lent to Erie. I've been trying to find out what the status of that final report is. They talked about how we need an iconic connection between the downtown and the Bayfront. Every consultant who has come into Erie has talked about the fact that we don't want cookie-cutter development. We want things that give a sense of place for Erie. So we're hoping to hear, I met with a group of people yesterday, tossing around some ideas to try and see if we can get some interest again in looking at that McAllister building to be developed instead of being torn down. And the reason I linked that to what Deborah Fallows said is because it struck me when she was talking about having accessible, there's the Bayfront Center for Maritime Studies, which works with youth, but we don't have anything down there that says, yeah, you can, if you don't have a lot of money, you can come and get a kayak or, so there's a lot of things, ways those two things tied together for me. So that's my report.
Thank you, Madam President. Congratulations to Councilman / State Rep Mirsky. Job well done. It's been a pleasure working with you, sitting with you, and our friendship will continue, I'm sure, and you will do an excellent job going down to the state. They're gonna have a rude awakening. They'll find out that you're not a yes man, and that's a blessing to you, my friend. Mayor, I think your presentation was outstanding today. I understand what you need. We're going to try to get it to you. I'm sure there's going to be some changes made, but there will be suggestions. We will let you know about the changes prior to coming to the meeting where we have to vote on it. I think it's only important and fair and professional that we get back to you, say this is what we like, and then you need to say to us, well, that's great, but if we do this, what about this? Because there's things in administration that we don't deal with, that we don't understand, and so there need to be a dialogue on the budget session, and of course we must come up with a budget, regardless of what it is. If not, then the courts will decide, and we don't want that. I want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving and a safe Thanksgiving to you and your family. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Very brief, as I always try to be, but following up with Liz and the Port Authority, Brenda Sandberg did try to get back a hold of Liz to try to explain what their reasoning was to move forward with the demolition, but as liaison, she sent me a few items just to back up why their plan is, and you know, they've been going through this process since 2006 when it was on the talk about demolishing it then, and fortunately 12 years later the place isn't any newer, it's more run down. So they do have, they've had different developers interested, and then recessions hit, different things happened where unfortunately we're still stuck with a pretty old building down there. Would I love to see it refurbished if it was fiscally possible? Sure, but there is a meeting December 12th, so anybody with any concerns, please go down to the Port Authority at 12 noon. They have their meeting, and express your concerns. Unfortunately, I did not get to the EMTA meeting with all the issues in the last couple months. I missed it on my calendar, but with that being said, I do wish the new board members a good term in representing both the city and the county in this. I did speak to the interim executive director, Jeremy Peterson, yesterday. He will be getting together with council after the first of the year when budget's out of the way and appointments for council are out of the way, and just give us an update on the Phase 2 project down there on Parade Street and how the state of the EMTA is going on the whole. Other than that, just, Bob, thanks for your service here. Bring us money. We need it, whatever you can do. And good luck. And everyone else, happy Thanksgiving.
Kathy.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I would like to thank Bob for all your service. It's been great working with you, and I'm looking forward to continuing discussing things with you as well. Thank you very much. Those people who are wanting to be on City Council, now's your time to get your resumes on, and I will talk about that in a little bit. I want to thank the lawyers and the people who come into the caucus room in the morning to discuss with us new business, things that they want to address. Mr. Mailer was in the caucus room this morning and talked about the new proposal that we voted on through the new business. And I'm looking forward to the opening of telling the people what their plans are. So I'm very excited about that. And Mr. Mailer was able to address all my questions in caucus. So I'm very appreciative to all of the lawyers that do that, all the people that come in. It makes an understanding for us on council. A while ago, not too long ago, someone asked me, perhaps thinking about running or being a part of council, because we will have to vote on a new person since Bob will be leaving us. And they asked me the number of hours that a person spends on council. And I could not give an answer right at the top of my head because I don't go around with a logbook jogging down all my hours. It says that council is a part-time job, and I'm here to tell you that I make it a full-time job. You meet with people and you go to meetings, so everybody makes it. It's a juggle because you have to juggle your relationship and family at home, and you have work commitments that are also involved, and then you have city council. So it is a big juggle of time, and you do give up a lot of personal time. I'm a very social person right now, and lots of people are asking me to come to Christmas parties, and I'm saying I cannot RSVP to you until I know what is going on with when we're meeting with budgets and things like that. I was able to attend the Mayoral Disability Roundtable. I like to go to that. They have it once a month at the Intermodal. I thank the mayor for being a part of that and heading that up. I think that's excellent. I went to the Water Authority meeting and Neighborhood Watch Council meetings. I like to be a part of learning what's going on in city proper. So I attend the zoning meetings when I can, and I attend the City Planning Commission meetings, because that makes me more aware of my votes and things like that. The Erie citizens who voted me into office, you are my priority, and I know your struggles. So I'm just a small part of a team that is here to say, Erie citizens, do not give up. We have great things going on, and I look forward to what's going to continue in the year 2019. We are living on a precipice of change in Erie. There's a lot of small business movements going on, and I know that many people are struggling out there. We are here for you. Just because things going on for a first reading, like for instance panhandling, to me that's still a work in progress. I went to the meeting on homelessness. We agreed that there are homeless issues, there's mental health issues, there's panhandling issues. But to me, that was not resolved as far as making that a final vote, and that's why I chose that. As a teacher, I always said there's no such thing as a dumb question. So we have to keep that mindset and have an open mind and brainstorm. I would love City Hall foyer to be open. When I was in Bath, Maine, my husband and I attended a gallery night, and it was inside City Hall along with the other businesses and galleries and that. We have that open area, and we can lock it off like we do, so that yes, you can use the bathrooms. We could have gallery nights here. We could have hot chocolate warming sessions in here. We could dance in here. That's a wonderful open foyer. I want the city of Erie to really know that we're trying our best. The mayor is out there. He's so accessible, so that's a wonderful thing. God bless us, everyone. Have a great Thanksgiving. Thank you.
I'd like to say congratulations to Mr. Mirsky, and it's been a pleasure working with you, not just on council, but in the community. And I agree with Jim, we're looking for the money, so we're going to be coming to you, and good luck in your new chapter.
Madam President, since Kathy said that there are no dumb questions, I don't think it's a dumb question, but Rose, would you be able to explain the process for, and Kathy talked about, resumes and applications, but since we still have a few people here and people might be watching online, can somebody explain how the process will work for filling this seat? And Ed, you've told us we have 30 days to fill it, but Rose, is there something you can tell the public about how they can apply to become a member of City Council?
Yes, there'll be an ad put in the paper encouraging applications. We'll also reach out to all the news media to get the word out there. We will take applications for 1 week. After that time, it will be up to council to meet and go over these applications as they will. And then at the end of that time, we will have the balloting process, which will be, it will vote down until you have your one person that's going to be appointed.
Do the applicants have an opportunity to present to City Council in addition to the the written application? The reason I'm asking is because I know Harrisburg City Council had an opening, and there were 24 applicants, and it took a long time, but they all had a chance to be interviewed. So is that up to council's rules to decide?
Yes, that's up to council. I've not seen that in my years here. I also want to make note that the applications will be sent to me, the city clerk, at my address, 626 State Street, room 104.
And can they also be done electronically, by email? Or
Sure.
Okay.
We'll include that in the ad as well.
Okay, and do we know when the ad is going in? Does the ad not go in
No,
until it's official?
I'm not sure about that. If we can, I haven't officially, well, the resignation will go to council president.
You can place, I mean, you can place the ad at any point. I mean, if
Okay.
it was an iffy, I'm not sure I'm gonna leave or not, but we know, Mr. Murphy's gonna be gone, so I have no problem placing an ad.
And we'll have it on the city's website, too?
Sure, we can put it on the website as well.
Thanks.
Okay. And Mayor, I want to thank you for your budget proposal. We have a lot of work to do. You know, we got so much going on in our city, and you know, our citizens is being taxed every which way. And whatever we can do so that we don't have to tax them, we need to come together, think of other ideals where we can get this money from. That's what we need to do. You know, we have a lot of people who live on fixed income, a lot of people who live in poverty, and the more we take from them, the less they're going to have to live on. So, you know, I thank you for all the work you did to present your budget to us. It's a good budget, but a few of the things on there, you know, we just want to find other ways to come up with that money, and I want to thank you for that. And two, I hope everybody have a happy Thanksgiving, a peaceful and a safe Thanksgiving. And with that said, Teresa, do you have anything?
I do not, other than happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
Okay. Mayor?
Just 5 real quick things. One is there was a Gannon announcement on Monday that I want to make sure everybody's aware. It was very exciting. They're establishing iHack on 10th Street, right across from VelocityNet. I had a chance to tour VelocityNet over the weekend. It's an incredible facility with high-tech jobs. I think I heard the average salary of the 100 or so employees that work there is like $60,000. They're going to be working in the city, right across the street, Gannon's new facility, which is, again, going to help educate students on the jobs of the future. Our manufacturing days are long behind us. It's now all high-tech and internet and that sort of thing. I don't really understand that, but I know that those are the jobs of the future. Also, I want to congratulate Bob Mursky on his appointment or his election. He's going to give us a very strong voice in Harrisburg, and look forward to working with you on that, Bob. There was a homelessness meeting that I think Kathy mentioned that she was at last week, and one of the things I was happiest about, there was like 45 people in that room. We couldn't have packed anybody more into room 500, and they were elected officials, county, city as well, and nonprofits and volunteers that work with the homeless. The thing I was most excited about is they agreed we can eliminate homelessness. We just have to start working together, everyone together, instead of everybody in their silo doing it. So we're really happy and encouraged about what's going to happen there. Fourth, I just want to mention, I really look forward to working on the budget with you. If I'm available, I'm going to come to the study sessions to hear the conversation. And if you can improve it, God bless you. I want you to. Anything you can do to make it better, I'm going to fully support. So thanks very much. I look forward to working with you on that. And finally, to everyone, have a happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy it. And we'll get back to work next week. Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving. That's all I got.
Okay, with that said, council meeting is adjourned.
City Council adjourns at 11:21. Mrs. Arrington, Ms. Allen, Mr. Mursky, Mr. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon.
My old boss had